Welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you've ever found yourself staring at a massive syllabus at 2 a.m., fueled by literally nothing but sheer panic and stale coffee, yeah, you know studying isn't just about memorizing facts. It's a grueling, exhausting mental marathon. But today, we're going to reframe that whole mundane academic journey. We're looking at it as a profound psychological transformation, and we're doing this using a seriously fascinating ancient roadmap, the Hindu archetypes of the 10 Dasmahvidyas. We're going to map these ancient archetypes directly to the psychological shifts you go through as a student. Okay, so let's dive right into our core premise here. You might be thinking, what does a mystic meditating in a remote cave have to do with me, a stressed out student in a library? Honestly, you might think they have absolutely nothing in common. But fundamentally, a sadhaka, which is a spiritual seeker, and a modern student are actually pursuing the exact same goal. You are both going after the absolute mastery of your mind, your focus, and your knowledge. So whether you're seeking spiritual enlightenment or just, trying to survive finals week, you're on the exact same epic quest for self-mastery. Today, we're going to use these ancient archetypes as our roadmap. We'll be guiding you through 5 distinct phases of a student's awakening. That's 1, waking up and finding calm. 2, creating joy and space. 3, forging unyielding study discipline. 4, surviving failure and distraction. And 5, achieving balanced academic success. So, let's jump right into phase 1, waking up and finding calm. This is all about overcoming procrastination and exam panic.
All right, this brings us to the radical wake-up call of the goddess Kali. And wow, you probably know this crisis perfectly well. It's when you're totally paralyzed by the fear of failure, passively trapped in your comfort zone, and basically choosing procrastination over any real progress. Well, Kali manifests in your life when you suddenly develop that fierce, urgent courage to just stop making excuses. She's the literal energy of pulling that all-nighter, the energy of brutally cutting out distractions, like finally deactivating your social media and completely slaying that lazy version of yourself. The psychological shift here is just massive. You transition from this passive, trapped state into an unstoppable force of action, all just to survive an upcoming exam.
But hey, what happens when that action turns into pure panic? When extreme study stress hits, maybe you hit a total mental block during the test itself, or you're literally on the verge of crying from cognitive overload. Well, invoking the archetype of Tara acts as your mental anchor. Tara is that deep, calming breath you take where you close your eyes and tell yourself, okay, calm down, just focus on one question at a time. She rescues your intellect from drowning in emotional panic. It's a total shift from complete hysteria right back into logical, structured problem solving. Now, once you find that calm, we enter phase 2, creating joy and space, finding alignment and organizing your mind. So have you ever absolutely hated a subject, feeling like you're only doing it because your parents forced you or you just need the grade? That is exactly the crisis Tripura Sundari solves. She represents that amazing moment your mindset totally shifts. It's that magical instance when a dense, ugly mathematical equation suddenly looks elegant, or a dry history chapter actually reads like a beautiful, captivating story. You stop studying just for the marks. Your mind feels beautifully aligned with the material, and you move away from this mindset of forced labor into a deep, genuine love for learning. It's a real game changer. But listen, to actually support this newfound joy, you need the right environment. And that brings us to the goddess Bhuvaneshwari, who represents space. Let's be real, you simply cannot have a clear mind in a chaotic room where you're trying to multitask and ending up achieving absolutely nothing. Bhuvaneshwari manifests through practical, immediate action. You clean your room, you declutter your study desk, you organize your timetable. By taking these straightforward actions, you transition out of claustrophobic mental clutter and into a calm, open space. You can finally step back and view your entire academic year with a broad, focused perspective. With a clear space, inspiration has got to meet the grind. Phase 3 is forging unyielding study discipline, building willpower, and breaking analysis paralysis. This is the point where raw grit and execution absolutely must take over. When you lack consistency or you just want to quit because the topic gets incredibly difficult, you need Bhairavi. She represents tapas, which means academic heat. We're talking strict, unyielding willpower here. It's the grueling discipline required to wake up at 4 a.m. every single day, to sit at a desk for 6 hours straight, to look your friends right in the eye and say no to parties and movies. Bhairavi is this fierce fire that burns away your weaknesses through sheer grit. She shifts you from an easily distracted mind to an absolutely unbreakable one. But willpower alone isn't going to cut it if you're stuck in your own head. If you're crippled by overanalysis, constantly worrying about peer competition, or agonizing over getting the perfect rank. The archetype of Chinnamasta asks you to perform the radical act of cutting off that over-analytical head. You replace it with bold, unhesitating execution. You have to completely stop worrying about what everyone else is doing. You sacrifice your temporary social popularity, and you blindly throw yourself into raw, focused action for that higher academic goal. Of course, every hero faces the dark night of the soul, which brings us to our fourth phase, surviving failure and distraction, the dark night and the flow state. In this dark night, we face two distinct hurdles. First up is Dasmahvidya. Her crisis is failing an important exam, or maybe facing rejection for your absolute dream university. She is the heavy grief and profound disappointment of failure. But here's the thing. When you sit alone, when you accept the bitter truth without trying to escape it, and realize a bad grade doesn't actually define your existence, you experience Dasmahvidya's shift. You outgrow that superficial pride and you develop a really deep, resilient maturity. And then we have Bagalamukhi. Her crisis is that toxic inner voice whispering, "You're not smart enough," especially when you're surrounded by distracting noise and gossip. Bagalamukhi is the ultimate power of mental stillness. She silences your inner critic so completely that the external world literally disappears. It instantly paralyzes your self-doubt, locking your mind onto your textbook in an absolute laser-sharp state of flow.
Surviving that failure builds toward our ultimate peak. Phase 5, achieving balanced academic success, out-of-the-box thinking, and complete self-actualization.
Because let's face it, it's just not enough to merely memorize. If you're acting like a rote-learning robot who can't apply knowledge to real-world problems, well, that's where the goddess Matangi comes in to spark your untraditional intellect. She pushes you to stop blindly copying whatever the teacher says and to start actually thinking critically. You start asking unconventional questions, you make unique connections, and you begin expressing complex ideas in your own highly creative words during essays and debates. Basically, you completely transform from a robotic, rule-following memorizer into a brilliant, independent thinker. Finally, we reach Kamala. She represents the fully bloomed lotus. Because honestly, it is entirely possible to be a student who scores amazing grades but is totally miserable, physically exhausted, and socially awkward. Kamala represents the state of complete holistic balance. This is the student who has not only mastered their studies with excellent results, but is also genuinely healthy, physically fit, emotionally fulfilled, and just happy. It's the absolute peak of self-actualization. You transition from a stressed, struggling seeker into a highly integrated, joyful individual, reaping the rewards of all your hard work with grace and gratitude.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to take a hard, honest look at where you are right now. We've just mapped out this entire psychological transformation, from a lazy, fearful mind all the way to a completely actualized, joyful master of knowledge. So I have to ask you, which of these 10 academic phases or crises are you currently battling in your studies right now? Do you need Kali's fierce wake-up call to finally beat that procrastination? Or maybe you need Bagalamukhi's power to silence your toxic inner critic and find your flow state. Reflect on this roadmap. Identify the exact battle you're fighting today and figure out what mental exercise you need to absolutely conquer it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep growing and